commit to the play and don't feel like you're the worst one in the class.
It's really cool to kind of see them think outside of the box.
Sometimes those criticisms aren't necessarily right.
It's a great idea, but it has to be educational.
So to get us started, I kind of just want to have you introduce yourself. What do you do here at Willcox Theater and Arts, and how long have you been here?
Well, all right. Let's see. Introduce myself. What I do here is basically, run the concession stand when movies are playing about 4 days a week. Usually Tuesday and Wednesday, Saturday and Sunday. And it's not real difficult work. And when Gary asked me to do it, I was like, oh, okay, cool. I knew I could probably work that in with the other job I have at the Holiday Inn, because I work there a couple nights a week, and then usually one or two other shifts during the week. It works out pretty nicely when you think about the fact that a lot of people don't have a job, but that number's going down all the time because businesses are feeling encouraged to be able to go and hire more people because they don't have to pay as much in taxes as they had, in the previous 10, 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, cool.
Worked out nice for them. I grew up in Washington State.
Mm-hmm.
I was born in Utah, but I grew up in Washington State in a little town called Wharton. It's a lot like Willcox, only smaller. So if you wanted to find the center of town, it wouldn't take you very long.
Yeah.
I like to say that, when the one traffic light turns red, all the lights dim. And the tourists who do come there use sawed-off binoculars.
Oh, gotcha.
So, yeah. Graduated 7th in my class, which isn't as impressive as it sounds because there was only 33 of us. And went to a few different colleges before finally getting a degree in interdisciplinary studies from Heritage University in Central Washington.
Mm-hmm.
It works out to about 10 years of 4 years worth of school.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, it was good.
How long have you been working with us?
I think a little less than a year, but we're getting toward a year. Probably, I want to say around March or April or something like that. I'm not entirely positive, but definitely over 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So
Cool. So you told me earlier you're an artist. What kind of stuff do you do?
Well, most of what I've done has been with watercolor pencils.
Mm-hmm.
I'll take the pencil, I'll draw in a regular graphite pencil, and then I'll go back, color with the watercolor pencils, and then I'll brush on the water, which is probably not the most conventional technique, I suppose, but it's what works for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because, while I could probably take some classes and work on, more classic watercolor techniques or acrylic or oil or whatever, I like the quasi-realism that I can do. It's sort of like doing a watercolor cartoon.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I'm a big fan of the comics. I grew up reading Garfield. I've enjoyed such strips as Pearls Before Swine, which I'm going to tell you right now, Stefan Pastis, there are times in some of his strips where he works really hard to get that pun payoff.
Mm-hmm.
It's like he'll come up with these convoluted premises and work its way through 3 panels and deliver the joke, and then in the last one, one of the characters will come up to his desk and, make a snide comment. It's like, you are such a dork, so, something along that line. Not necessarily those words, but, something that basically says that you are, kind of like the lowest form of humanity going like. But yeah, it's, I've enjoyed comic strips for years. So, so my style of drawing is a little cartoonish. I also, it was about, I want to say it was about 2003. I checked a book out from the library on drawing and just started copying some of the pictures that were in the book and, learning about vanishing point and perspective and shading and different elements of artistic, drawing. No one's going to mistake what I do for a Van Gogh, but it's something I've enjoyed over the years.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, my nephew is going to Central Washington University studying fine arts, and some of the stuff that he's posted on his social media are just absolutely fantastic. I mean, I'm in awe of his talent.
Yeah, I've drawn all my life, but then there's like times where like I'm drawing way more, and then times where I probably don't pick up a pencil for like months. And then when I see like art school students, I'm like, wow, they're professionals already. But it's also like they wake up, they draw. They probably draw before they go to bed. They wake up, they do it again. Like it's more
all encompassing, sure.
Yeah, it's just like their entire life. And so that was something I always kind of wanted to do, was go to art school and study and be in it and everything. But being kind of more self-taught, I think it's like you kind of approach things differently.
I think so.
Yeah, like you might not have the daily like requirement to draw, so it's more of like, well, do I want to draw today? Like, and then you kind of go from there instead of being like, well, my assignment today is to draw. So that's something I've always found interesting compared to schooling versus self-taught. And so you never went to school for anything? It's all just been...
Yeah, it's pretty much, I drew in elementary school, I drew in middle school, I drew a little bit in high school, but I kind of, left it by the wayside once I became an adult for a while because, there was the concerns of making a living and, starting a family, that sort of thing. So it wasn't until I had a little bit, less hands-on parenting to do that I could, indulge that personal thing. So
yeah, I get you. Okay, so so you said like in 2003, that's sort of when you got back into it. You got more
a little bit
heavy into it. Do you remember when you like first started drawing? Were you like innately the drawing kid, or did something inspire you?
I suppose I was always drawing. I remember doing one for like a school poster assignment, and I had this guy, throwing a boomerang, but he had a left hand on his right arm. So it was, it was not what I would call perfect, but when you're in elementary school, perfection is hard to come by, especially when you're talking about putting a thumb on the wrong side.
Something I would do a lot when I was drawing as a kid is I was really bad with like symmetry, especially when drawing people. And so if I could somehow draw scenery in it or additional clothing, I would pretty much only draw one half of a person, and then the rest of the other half would just be covered up. And I'm like, yeah, it's just part of the picture. But I just literally could not, because anytime I would try to go back to the other side and make the eyes the same area, the same shape, or like the arms to make them look proportionate, they'd be two different people stitched together, and so I just sort of gave up on that.
Yeah, that can be challenging, especially when you're talking about someone who might be at an angle. It's like, how much bigger do you make the close shoulder versus the distant shoulder? If the arm is bent versus straight, is it pointed, and do you have to foreshorten the arm, or do you have to raise it up. There are a lot of great books on drawing anatomy. Some of them, will incorporate clothes, and a few won't. But that the human body can be a challenge to draw just because there are so many ins and outs with it.
Yeah.
I never do nudes just because I don't need to do that. I don't feel compelled to try and draw a nude human because, frankly, there's too much of that out in the world already. And I don't need to obsess about, the human body. It's just not what I need to focus on. I like nature. I like natural things. But that's just borderline pornography, and that's just not my thing.
Yeah,
I just don't need to go there.
Yeah. So over your process, what have been some of your biggest struggles? Some of your your hardships that you've pushed through and that you find yourself coming to again, or something that you've had to overcome?
Well, like you were talking about symmetry, that was something that when in my youth, it was always a struggle I would have. It was like if I put 2 feet side by side, one would be the Skipper's and one would be Gilligan's. There was just this size differential that was Bruce Banner versus the Hulk kind of thing. It was it wasn't until I got hold of a book that was produced in part. It was produced by an organization called Klutz, I think it was what it's called. And it was a Marvel book on drawing superheroes. And because most of the characters in the Marvel realm are fairly proportional, it made it so that I could, come around and do a little bit closer symmetry. It uses foundational principles of drawing. But their focus is still on, their characters. Did a Hulk, did a Wolverine, did a Spider-Man, of course. As that was part of the book, and I can still do those characters, but that's not the first thing I go to anymore. I still enjoy superheroes, and I came and watched Endgame. That was a fun time. I waited a couple of days because the first 3 or 4 days were just. It was like everybody and their dog came to see the movie.
Yeah. So okay, that actually brings me to a really interesting point, because I get surrounded with a lot of people who say I only draw original stuff. I don't want to copy things, but then they seem to run into struggles of more of you're kind of guessing what it looks like and not kind of like having a study. So talk to me maybe about your opinion of copying images and then learning forms and shapes, or drawing something original maybe all the time.
Well, drawing original stuff is not a bad thing to do. If you can come up with something original, great. When you're starting out, drawing things that you can see. I mean, if you're a beginner and you were trying to draw the American flag over there, you're going to struggle a little bit because you're not going to be able to handle the folds and twists and turns that a flag does when it's just hanging from a pole. Whereas later on, once you've had a chance to kind of get used to visualizing how the lines travel, you'll be able to kind of get an idea of where things go and how things fall, how gravity affects the fabric. But when you're starting out, you really aren't doing yourself a disservice by copying things, because that's how a lot of people start out, drawing, is because, they imitate those lines, especially, when you're talking about children. If they can imitate the lines that they see, once they have that, manual dexterity to create that line, and one of the things that I tell people that are trying to improve on their drawing when they ask me, your best friend is your eraser.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not satisfied with the line, don't press the pencil so hard that you'll never really get rid of it. Where you end up where Humpty Dumpty might have a belly button or something. Just keep it light until you're sure of where your line is, and then you can more or less trace over it with the heavier pressure.
Yeah, for sure. I get that. Yeah. What is something maybe that, as you're drawing or painting or anything, that kind of surprises you every time, where you come across the technique and you're just like, oh.
Well, I don't venture out too much when it comes to technique. If with a little more time and maybe a little more money, I might take a couple of classes and find some styles that I could incorporate and be able to do. As part of my college work, I did do an art class, and we did batiks, and we did this, that, and the other thing, and it was fun to do. It was branched out into some different techniques, even among watercolors, which I had by that time done a little bit. It was there was I didn't think of a nail as a piece of artist equipment, where you could scratch the cold press paper, and when the watercolor paint gets in there, it creates a solid line that basically is there forever.
Wow. Yeah. So with your watercolor, because I've done more watercolor where more like wet on wet stuff, or like where the water keeps its like fluidity and it's almost random in a way. Like it's controllable, but it's almost
that's kind of a feature of wet on wet. Sure.
Yeah. So doing your watercolor pencils, does it ever get away from you? How do you?
Not really, because if I put too much water in the brush and then hit the wrong spot, it can have that wet on wet effect where you end up with a light kind of a hole in the color, as opposed to a smooth or graded shading. The thing that usually gets me is overloading the water in the brush.
Gotcha. Okay. What would you tell someone who's just starting out drawing? Like if they were just like die hard on being good right now, but they just started.
Be patient with yourself. Even Michelangelo, didn't create the David or paint the Sistine Chapel the first day he tried it. Nobody has ever been a virtuoso painter when they first pick up a brush. With any talent, whether it's singing or doing comedy or painting, writing, anything that you are endeavoring to do artistically is going to require a little bit of work, especially when you're talking about something you would want to present to the world. Once you have practiced a little bit, you'll be able to have a little more confidence. But when you're first starting out, just be patient with yourself. Remember that your eraser is your best friend. And read as many art books as you can get your hands on, especially when you're talking about improving your proportions. Like the Klutz book that I mentioned. That one book helped me improve my proportion of a human figure, just because I learned that a head is about 1/7 of a body. So it's about, if you have about 7 heads high, you've got about an average person's, proportions. And then, you can make the shoulders wider or narrower depending on the character you're doing. You can make the torso longer. For instance, if you are trying to draw Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic from the Fantastic Four, you can make that torso longer because he's a stretchy character. You can make him twist and turn and do all kinds of, different unnaturally, different positions. Mm-hmm. If you're talking about an ordinary, fixed body human, yeah, you can find books that will help you do those figures, and a lot of people say, I only draw stick figures. That's a great place to start. If you think about it, a skeleton is a stick figure. You can work from there. One of the techniques they emphasized in the books that I've seen, you create that framework of the stick man, mm-hmm. and you don't just shoulders come out a little bit. You don't just draw arms from the neck.
Yeah,
okay?
That's true.
So when you're doing a stick figure, account for those shoulders, account for the hips, and then the legs can spread out a little bit. The arms will be out a little farther, but you don't have to make them too far out because otherwise you're going to be dealing with a condor or some such thing. And once you've got that stick man or woman, as the case may be, you'll be able to make what's called a pipe man, which is basically, kind of starting to flesh out the frame. And once you've got that together, you'll be able to kind of start changing details, adding, shapes, musculature, start working on clothing if that's what you're trying to do. And even with Marvel characters, you have to remember that there are taller characters, shorter characters. Wolverine standing next to Colossus would be a little like Michael Jordan standing next to me. Mm-hmm. Because he's about 8 inches taller than I am, so there'd be a clear difference. A lot of people, when they're first starting out, will draw, dissimilar characters like that the same size, which isn't accurate, because you can easily draw different sizes, but then if you're not sure of your lines, erase, try again. Mm-hmm. That's the thing about drawing, is that no matter how bad you think it is, an eraser will fix a lot of your mistakes.
Yeah. Do you ever redraw the same thing over and over again? Or do you sort of, if you started drawing, you use your eraser until it's at a point you're happy? Or do you ever go back and completely redo?
Sometimes all three. There are times when I will just keep working at one drawing until it gets to where I want it. Sometimes I'll fling over my shoulder and start over, because that's an option. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I've drawn, I haven't drawn the same thing over and over a lot, but I've done repeat drawings a couple of times. It's not, I don't know, I guess once I've done that, I can, move on to the next thing, but I can go back and draw something new. I've drawn, a couple of different things a second time. One was this picture for a business organization that there was a concept where there was a there was a wolf kind of in the foreground right. There's a sheepdog in the center, very center. Now, versus depth versus side to side, and then in the background left was a flock of sheep, and the sheepdog is there obviously to protect the flock from the wolf, which the wolf represents debt. The sheepdog is financial, principles, good solid financial principles, don't spend more than you earn, that kind of thing. And then the sheep are just, the people that are being, they're out there just doing their thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the symbolism aside, that's one picture I've done a couple of different times.
Okay, cool. Do you ever geek out about art stuff? Like, for example, whenever I meet another videographer, I love talking about the cameras they use, how they got certain shots, and man, I can listen to that all day and go back and forth about how we do stuff or what it is that we're using.
You like to talk shop, yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes. I mean, if I run into somebody who has done some drawing, we'll talk about it. And a lot of times when I'm talking to somebody, they're in those initial stages of trying to draw, and I tell them basically what I've said here: be patient with yourself. Your eraser's your best friend, and keep at it, because the more you do, the more better you'll get.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hey, this was great. Thank you for sitting down and talking with me.
Oh, absolutely. It's been fun.
Thank you all for listening to The Green Room, and thank you to Detrick for letting me interview you. If you found any of this helpful or insightful, make sure to share it with a friend. If you want to listen to this on the go, hit us up on anchor.fm/greenroom, and you can download it, listen to it while you're running, while you're driving to work, doing whatever you want to do. If you want to see more of this, please leave a like below and subscribe. Let us know what your favorite part was and what other kind of topics you want to see covered on the show. Anyway, guys, thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.